Joe Ryan, we were just talking pre-recording. We already got in the flow here.
How you doing, Colt? Nice to see you.
You too. It's nice to see you. And I really been enjoying your podcast. I just love the title. It's not you, it's your trauma, right?
Yeah.
And
hmm
it just first of all, what's it like doing this podcast, and how'd you get yourself to do it, get out of your own way, and just maybe you didn't get out of your own way, maybe it's natural for you.
Yeah, it wasn't planned. I just started, I had this trauma recall about 4 years before I started, 3, 4 years before, and I just kept spiraling down. And, writing for me was a way to kind of get in touch with myself, to find out what the reality of my life was. And that was
Yeah.
always very soothing, and light bulbs had gone on, but I found that the writing just wasn't doing it anymore. And one day I just was feeling really, really down, and I went to my office and I plugged in a microphone. I started recording as a replacement to writing, and
Wow.
I just started to listen a little bit, and it was really painful to hear your truth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then one day I let somebody listen to one of the episodes, and they're like, "You're crazy for not putting this out." And I'm like, "I don't know if I could survive people knowing this about me."
Yeah.
So I started putting it out there, and you don't think anybody's ever really going to listen, and
Yeah.
then they start to listen, and then you go into more of your shame, because then you realize people really know what's going on with you, and you've been hiding it for so long. But there was so much healing in it for me to
Yeah.
come out of hiding, because trauma is just secret shame, hiding, covering up, layers of defenses. You never show your authentic self because you don't feel like you have any value or worth. And
Yeah.
I spent my life living a false self, and I would come
Yeah.
in as what I thought you wanted to see, and I
Yeah.
kind of denied my entire reality. And I was like, I spent so much time on one end portraying something I wasn't, that I completely ignored the dark side. And I felt like I really needed to get in touch with that to find the middle ground, because I know I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not the
Yeah.
disaster that I really believe I am, and I'm not as good as I tried to portray myself as. So in the
Right.
middle somewhere is where I lie.
Wow. That's so, I love what you said. I feel like I'm talking to myself. And just, yes, like putting this, controlling how other people perceive me, and thinking that's how I'm gonna get love and belonging. But ultimately, like when I started my podcast, I did not want to do it, but I work with people with substance abuse and trauma, and clients kept telling me, you need to start a podcast. I'm like, no, no.
Right.
And I heard something. Are you familiar with Mark Groves?
No, I got to be honest with you. I stopped listening to a lot of people of everything about 3, 4 years ago. I just kind of was working on it myself, because I would listen to something, I would get attached to it, think that was the answer, chase it
Ah,
for a
yeah.
couple of months, I'd get to the end. So I ended up stopped listening and reading, and I started feeling more. So no, I'm not familiar, but tell me about them.
Well, first of all, that's awesome. You're essentially what you're saying is, instead of looking to a bunch of people to perhaps heal you or give you a new philosophy or paradigm, you just did the work.
Yeah, well, I spent like almost 30 years reading, writing,
Yep.
listening, and I was cerebral about it. It's like, if I can figure it out in my head, I'll be healed.
hmm
And after like almost 3 decades of not, getting a little bit better here and there as I moved along, but there was always still something that, when I had that trauma recall and I went back and I sat with those feelings for 4 hours,
Wow.
and after that, the rawness of it, it all clicked for me. It's like, no, you can't think your way through this. You have to think your way out of it. You have to feel your way through it.
Wow. That's so
Yeah.
beautiful. I that's been my experience too, is just I could just skim all these books, skim all these podcasts, and hopefully I just pick it up and heal. And that's not been my experience. It's been actually, I remember my buddy Martin told me, he was like, you might just have to sit in a chair and cry.
Yeah, that's it. I always say that I schedule time to feel bad, because you would schedule time to entertain and socialize and all that, and you
Yeah.
never schedule time to really be with your feelings. So yeah, it's sitting with yourself, feeling bad, crying, sobbing, anger, whatever those emotions that you cut off, it's time to integrate them. So yeah, I agree 100%. There's a lot of crying that's gone on over the last 4 years, I can tell you that.
I love that, because I've been kind of doing that naturally, not so as I suppose on purpose, pulling back from listening to a lot of podcasts and books, because I just realized, like, wait a second, the no one's coming for me. Ultimately, people are going to support me. They're going to keep me accountable if I look for it, sure. But ultimately, it's me and in my relationship with myself. At least that's the way I word it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, were you kind of waiting for an apology or waiting for somebody to show up,
Mm,
to kind of ease the burden on you? And,
yeah,
after 8,000 codependent relationships and waiting decades for an apology, if finally you realize it's not coming, and if you don't do the
yeah,
work, it's
yeah.
never going to get done.
Yeah, and I was certainly, for me, would be looking for like a romantic relationship in a woman, and like okay, once I find her, then everything's gonna be okay. Disney, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh, you
Yeah,
got to love Walt. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. That
And
was same my experience.
and she'll look like this, and she'll talk to me like this, and she'll complete me.
Right. We're
And
still looking for that mirroring face that we never got. And we usually go the opposite gender of us
yeah,
to find that, to reflect back and go, I just need you to look at me the way I need to be seen so that I feel whole and complete.
yeah.
Not too
And
much pressure on the other person.
and I know there's some cliches here, but I think they're true. It's like this is an inside job, and you got to be the one. And if people can, here's you, put a circle around it, and people can honor that and hold space with that, then okay, great. But if you're looking for someone to be like, complete me, then we're, at least in my experience, it never works. It doesn't work. And I'm getting better and better at people that are in my life are complimenting where I'm going. So
Yeah, yeah. I think the difference is being enmeshed to independent and somewhat overlapping, so that enmeshment, we're completely intertwined with each other. And when you
mhm.
have the independence where you're living your life, she's living her life, but there's a overlap that you guys connect. That to me is the healthiest. But I have really shitty boundaries, so that's been extremely difficult to achieve. But it does get easier over time.
It does, yeah. And I've gotten better. I'm still work to do and self-differentiating, right? And
Hmm.
I love what you said, like the enmeshment's like sticky kind of stuckness together. And then sometimes in my experience, I've totally cut off and push everyone away. That doesn't work either. It's kind of finding that dance with people.
Yeah, I mean, intimacy issues with trauma is, common. So there's this fine line of too much of intimacy distance and too little. So if
Yeah.
somebody pulls away from me and it feels too much, my
Mhm.
abandonment issues kick in.
Yeah.
If they come too close, my emotional incest wound kicks in. So there's like this fine line that I have to
Yeah.
kind of walk. And the other person's kind of looking at you going, you keep backing up and then you keep getting closer. You're confusing the shit out of me. And it's like my body is just reacting and I'm trying to get a handle on it.
Oh man. Yeah. This is hard. I remember I have something, an echo in my head that has so much shame, and I've had to sit with it, like you said, schedule my pain. So I just don't
Mhm.
understand you, Colt. You let me get close to you. You got too close, and I'm like, oh my god. But yeah, it's just journey. It's just process and really sitting with self. And I love what you say in your podcast. Go ahead.
I was going to say that the trust that you build with yourself as you do this work
Yes.
helps those intimacy issues, because you learn that you can say no. You learn that you can set boundaries. For me, I just feel like when I meet somebody, I got to give myself up completely, do what they want. Otherwise, if I say no once, they're leaving. So it's a pass fail. There's no gray area.
Yeah.
So, but as you learn to trust yourself and kind of self-discipline and self-care, you realize what your limits are and what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. When you don't have boundaries, it's like somebody just comes in and can trash you emotionally,
Yeah.
leave, and then you're stuck cleaning up the mess. So the
Yep.
boundaries are important in intimacy.
Oh, absolutely. And ultimately, I'm the one that needs to enforce them. Um, Reinforce what I'm loving and reinforce what I'm not liking. And
Yes.
it's both. I wanted to ask you, how do you define trauma?
It's it, you know what? It's an evolving definition.
Yeah,
5 years ago it was completely different. I didn't even acknowledge the word trauma 5 years ago.
me
Like
either.
it wasn't even in my vocabulary. And then it started to come into my vocabulary, and then this big light bulb had gone on where it's
Yes.
like, was it trauma? Was that traumatic? Was my experience? And then it was like, yeah. So for me, trauma is an event that had happened. that I couldn't process at the time based on if it was too much to handle at once because of my age, or even if I was older, it was too much. So you can't process it. So you bury it and you repress it and you put it away. But
Yeah.
your nervous system remembers everything. So if I walk into a situation that my subconscious remembers as fear and danger, I
Yeah.
get that response. And then there's this panic and this uncomfortableness and this fear where I look normal on the outside, but inside it's like there's a blender to my emotions. I start to sweat and I'm like trying to hold it all together and not
Yeah.
crumble into this emotional mess.
Yeah.
So that's how trauma shows up for me.
Yeah. I defined it before. I'm curious what you think about this. Is it's actually, I think it's in the Greek. I think trauma essentially means unresolved or unhealed wound.
Yeah,
And it keeps bleeding out. And if you don't actually address it, then you just keep bleeding out.
that's it exactly. And the only
Yeah.
way, there's no band-aid for it. Like you
Yeah.
just have to go in and sit with it, and that's how it slowly starts to heal. I mean,
Yeah.
I wish there was a magic pill or something. This work is really difficult,
Oh my
but
gosh.
yeah, that's what it is. It's an open wound that's unresolved. It's a memory. It's an imprint. It's in your being. It's in your cells, and you keep as far away from it as you possibly can because it's so painful. That's just, humans don't want to experience pain, but it's going to, and that's when shame shows up, right? So
Hmm.
shame is kind of trauma's protector, because
Hmm.
shame is kind of a dull ache that takes over your entire body. Trauma is more of an intense pain. So shame for me kind of covers the trauma and eases it. But after a while, it wants to be felt. It wants to be recognized. It needs the attention, that event, whatever it is, so that it's not an open wound anymore.
Yeah. Okay, I think I understand this. This is something I want to go more in depth with you. You've kind of taught me this again, cerebrally. I have a hard time pronouncing that word. I used to stutter. Um, but I think I get it. But let's see if I do. So, trauma is what you really need to deal with,
Yes.
and shame is like the force field for you not to deal with your trauma.
Yes, the shame and the self-hate keeps us occupied from feeling the trauma, the feelings of the trauma that we need to re-experience to heal. So this is all unconscious. It's like, you don't wake up one day and go, you know what, I'm just going to wrap shame around the trauma so I can get through the day.
No way.
It happens unconsciously. So for me, the way I look at it is, you have trauma, you have the shame, and you have the self-hate. So I've lived in self-hate, and
Yeah.
that was my protection. That was my excuse. That was, a way of not dealing. I can't do this because I'm just hating on myself so much and I'm not good enough. So as you start to peel away those layers and you sit with those feelings and see where your self-hate is and what you feel shameful of, as you start to resolve that, the trauma can rise a lot faster. And then you can sit with, the feelings, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, sexual abuse. It was too overwhelming to handle. So our body naturally protects us, and it was good at the time, but having systematic shame for 30 years takes a toll.
Oh, absolutely. And before I go a little more in depth in that, it's just, I remember a client asked me, "Wait a second, I don't have trauma because I wasn't raped, I wasn't in a terrible car accident." And again, going back to that definition, if you don't actually resolve something and it continues to like puppet you,
Hmm.
then you got trauma. So, right?
It drives the car.
Yep.
I just did it. I was just talking about it. It has made many decisions on my behalf that if I
Mm,
was in my right mind, not in my trauma response mind, I would have never made those decisions. And it just keeps you going further away from the pain. And the
yeah.
decisions I made to mood alter were, devastating in some respects, and completely ruined my life. I had no control. I would want to do things, but the fear would start to kick in, and it'd be like I would talk myself out of it, and then I would go in another direction where I just needed to kind of anesthetize my brain with some action or drugs or whatever the thing was, so that I just didn't feel what was in my body.
Therefore, and henceforth, the 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 payoff is that you don't have to actually deal with your trauma, but the cost is you don't get to live your life.
You're not in control of your life. You are not make decisions. Your soul is sitting there going, "What about me?
Yeah.
Like, I really want to do things in this world that I enjoy, but you're just not allowing me because you're listening to the darkness instead of this side of it. So by experiencing the darkness and kind of making friends with it, and holding it and letting it, you have to let it just take you over and kind of kick your ass and feel everything to get it out of you. And then you're just so much more emotionally lighter, that that fear part of your brain slowly slows down. And then your soul is like, hey, maybe we should take a nature walk. And I'm like, nature walk? I haven't left the bar in 15 years. What's a nature walk? Like, where did that thought come from? But eventually you start to gravitate towards more peaceful things, because somebody's told me take a walk, and I'd be like, you're going to put me alone with my thoughts? But there's no way. And you start to do things, because I didn't want to be alone with myself. I was too afraid of what was inside. And when we fear less what's inside of us, the growth happens, and then we can start living a more peaceful, enjoyable life and listen to our soul.
Joe, Ryan, I love this conversation.
Yeah.
I really do, because it's I kind of stumbled into working on my trauma kind of from my friends saying, maybe you just need to sit in your chair and cry. And I remember the first time I didn't engage in eating disorder behaviors, bulimia. I just sat in my bed and looked at the ceiling and just felt all the discomfort. And it was this really weird feeling that came over me. It wasn't like the dopamine you get from distracting or going to the bar or activating yourself in some way to distract from the trauma. It's almost like this, I don't know if it's serotonin, but it just felt like I'm okay. I got through that.
Yes.
I rode
And
that wave.
we teach our brains, our body, and our cells that we can handle it. So the goal is to become more powerful over your emotions than your trauma is over you. And when I first started sitting with the feelings like you're describing, it was less than 3 minutes, and I'm like tapping out. I'm like, I'm done. This is way too much.
Yeah.
And then slowly over time, you build up the endurance, like working out, to sit with it longer and longer, to the point where I'll go a couple of days, a week, and I won't feel any real disturbance in me. And then all of a sudden, I'll slowly start to feel it. And I
Yeah.
used to be like, oh God, no, you're back. Now it's more like, okay, there's something coming. I'm about to discover something. This is going to suck for a little while. I'm going to have to sit with it. And you start to welcome the disturbance, because when you have more skills to deal with it, and when you ride it out and you sit with it and you work it through, you're going to be that much lighter and freer on the other side.
Yeah. That's amazing. I have a Greek saying. I say "molan labe," which means "come at me, bro" in Greek. But it's
There
ancient.
you
It's an
go.
ancient saying. It's an ancient saying, so it doesn't really mean "come at me, bro," but that's a pretty good definition. But I
Yeah.
say "molan labe," and it just means come at me, Persians, whatever it is from 300, and I get stronger. It's not about, and this is something I want to get a little more in depth with a little bit later here, is it's not about getting safer. However, you do need some safety and take some baby steps. It's about getting stronger. And Carl Jung says, go where you least want to look. Oh,
Yeah.
but it's
You got
so
to
true.
you have to embarrass yourself to yourself first
Yes.
before you start to come out of hiding. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's never fun.
Yeah. And so going back to this self-hate, shame, and then the trauma underneath that, would you say that when you're having self-hatred, now it's like a signal, okay, time to work on that shame and therefore work on that trauma? Is that how you would word it?
Yes, it shows up. So the way it works for me is I feel like my subconscious recognizes something, and then
Mhm.
it activates my body and my nervous system. And then I'm like, what is this? Like, where did this come from? And then what happens is, you're not good enough. If you were man enough, if you were strong enough, if you were tough enough, you were whatever, you'd be able to handle this.
Just try
And
harder.
then right. I would just start to just get down on myself. And then I would avoid the situation, because now I'm completely out of my game. I don't feel like I'm within my own body. And then I avoid social situations, because everybody's going to see what a worthless piece of shit I believe myself to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the self hate, I feel, comes from the shame of not sticking up for myself when I should have when I was younger, for not
Yep.
dealing with these emotions. So that's kind of the way it shows up for me. I will beat myself up, and that's kind of, it became an excuse.
Yeah.
So I would self hate, and then I would make excuses not to go do these things. But really, it was just a way of protecting myself. Because if I didn't self hate, I wouldn't have had an excuse not to go. wherever it was that I knew I was going to feel uncomfortable. So that was my protection.
Mm,
And that was my excuse. And then I was able to justify where I should have just said, listen, something happened to you that makes you this way because your trauma and your emotions, and you're just fearing them, and you will get through it. Just show up. It's going to be difficult for a while. You'll start to feel safe. Because for me, I walk in, I'm never safe. It takes me a certain amount of time to scan the room, get the feel, make sure everybody's okay and nobody's coming at me, and then I'll
yeah.
relax.
Yeah.
If I just could talk myself into that, I
Mhm.
wouldn't have had to self-hate.
Yeah, absolutely. So awareness, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Yes.
it's ultimately awareness and like, okay, here we go. There it is again. You're not good enough. You're a piece of shit. Um,
And
you're not
and I
tall
think the
enough.
pro-
You're whatever.
I I think the problem with awareness is that by the time, I guess, logical thought had kicked in, like this happened way before I had any emotional intelligence. Like this conditioning was within me. So I just believed that this is the way people were. That it wasn't anything abnormal about it. Like that I just lived in fear and that's who I was.
Mm,
So I thought I was aware of who I was, but
mm,
then until you get to those moments of enlightenment where the light bulb goes on and you can start to see things differently, then you can dissect it. So just being in a false self and believing my reality was what I made it out to be
yeah.
didn't get me any closer to enlightenment. It's what you said about young. You have to go where you don't want to see
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
reality of it.
If I understood you correctly, like you had this pseudo self
Mhm.
of like, this is who I am. Even if it's a negative version of who you are, it's still a self that you were attaching yourself to. And then therefore, since you over identified with it, you never actually dealt with it. And therefore used the awareness to like, I see ya. Oh, yep. There's the shame. Oh, now I'm going to sit with self and actually go through it. Is that right?
Yeah, I cultivated this persona that I really truly thought was me. I would have There's no way you could convince me it wasn't. And then basically what happened was I built up my life the way I thought I needed to feel good, and I lost everything in a very short period of time. So all the things that I acquired and surrounded myself with, and the
Mhm.
status that I had come up with, that's what I wore on my chest. Look what I accomplished. Look what I acquired. Look what I achieved. Look what a nice guy, people pleaser I am.
Oh
And then
man.
you lose everything,
Yep.
and then I think the world is looking at me the way I really truly felt. So when you take everything away that you've worked for to cover up how worthless you feel, and then you have no armor around you,
Yeah.
you just feel transparently worthless. And that's what took me on the big nosedive.
Yeah. Okay. That's that's the nosedive as far as actually dealing with it.
Yeah, because there was nothing. It was almost like, all right, how long would it take me to acquire and get back to this place of status that I need to be to feel okay? And I'm in midlife when it happens, and I'm like, I don't have the time, energy, or desire to want to do that. Why can't I just feel good sitting here?
Mm.
And that's kind of what went through my head, and I couldn't just sit there and feel good because now I was in the feelings I had been avoiding.
Let me bring in an example. See if I got it. So, and I'm pretty sure I've always kind of understood this, but I like the way you frame it. So before getting on this podcast, I'm like, oh, Joe's podcast is way better than mine. I don't. This is what my brain's telling me, right?
Right.
I don't. My podcast is stupid. No one really listens to it, which is not true. Someone just sent me a message like, "Oh, your podcast is so amazing. It's really helping me." It's like a little therapy session. I'm like, "Oh, great. That's awesome. It's really encouraging to hear that because I want to help." And I got on my own way and started this podcast. So that's great. But my brain will tell me, oh, you're stupid. You don't really know what you're talking about. And
Yep.
so therefore just back out of this and tell Joe Ryan, hey, stuff came up. um, but I've learned to just like, okay, that's bullshit. Thank you for sharing, brain. Thank you. Oh, that's
Yes.
you're so cute. You're so cute. Or thank you for sharing trauma. Or how about thanks for sharing self-hate. And since I caught it and I'm watching it, I can therefore diffuse, like diffusing a bomb, diffuse the shame that goes along with that self-hatred, and then actually just self-regulate and go, yeah, of course you're nervous. Of course you
That
are. Because this is
that's
you're doing the work. Every time you do a podcast with a guest, you're doing the work. Of course. You're supposed to be nervous. And you can handle
and
it.
And that's how you do it. You explained it perfectly.
Yeah.
The awareness of recognizing what's going on between
Mhm.
your brain and your emotions and talking yourself out of it. I am nervous every time I do an interview,
Mhm.
every time I turn on the mic to speak, anytime I speak publicly. I get nervous. Like my trauma, my self-hate, my self-doubt all kicks in. I'm like, you have no value. You don't know what you're talking about. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to listen to your bullshit anymore. Will you just shut up and, go deliver food on a bike? You'll be a lot happier. There's less pressure doing that.
Yeah.
And I do that pretty much every time I speak.
Yeah. Go back to construction, Colt. Go swing a hammer like everyone else in your family, right? I mean, it's a good honorable living. Don't get me wrong, but it's like what are you doing trying to help people? Um, you know?
Yeah, that's a battle, internally that you have because I don't have a degree in this. I'm
Mhm.
just an expert in my own recovery.
Yeah.
I didn't die in an alley with a needle. I don't beat my kids. I'm not out, terrorizing neighborhoods. I've been a productive citizen, like I have lived and worked through this. So I had that stigma of, well, you don't have a degree. Who gives you the right to speak? And then when I get out of the trauma and the self hate, I look back and I was like, I've lived a tough life and I've come out the other side. And what I've done, maybe other people need to follow. And that's the thing that kind of keeps me motivated. Believe me, it would be so much easier just taking a desk job.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me because, and I'm certainly not. I think we need mental health professionals. Excuse me. But I mean, I would venture to say you have the degree of doing the work and going through it.
Yes.
And unfortunately, sometimes for whatever reason, bad training or misunderstanding what trauma really is, I run into clinicians that are trying to overprotect clients and keep them extra safe. And then the clinician gets overly activated, and then they don't actually do the work, which is unfortunate. And I think it's getting better. I think there's getting more defining the terms a little better and learning how to not get activated with the client's activation. But I find that interesting. So I just want to give you a little diploma there.
No, thank you. And I find the same thing with therapists. If they haven't had the level of pain that you've experienced, they
Mhm.
can't go there with you.
No.
So when somebody goes to a place that makes if you go to a place that makes the therapist uncomfortable, where they haven't done that work, they're going to take you out of your feelings. They're going to shift you to another path. So finding a therapist that can go all the way down where you need to go and hold that space and allow you to grieve and give them that mirroring face is so important. I have fired more therapists than I've kept in my life.
As you should. It, therapist is like trying on shoes, and you got to find one that fits, and that one that's not going to get activated and try to overprotect you and keep you safe. I mean, a therapist worth their salt is going to help you get stronger, not safer. However, again, you need to not go too fast and too hard into it, otherwise you'll re-traumatize yourself. There's a balance. I
Yeah,
mean,
I like that. Stronger, not safer. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah. I didn't make that up. I think that might be Young again, or one of his followers. But yeah, it's because I help clients, and I also heard it. You can't take people where you haven't gone, and you essentially said that.
Yep,
And,
exactly.
there's a need for mental health. Excuse me, let me turn that off. There's a need for mental health, and I think sometimes our culture has kind of just rushed people through school and get a bunch more mental health clinicians, and that's important to know, because just because they went to school doesn't mean they're a good fit.
No, and it's there's also a passion for it, right?
Mhm.
So, some people go get their degree and they're looking to make a nice living.
Yeah.
That's their choice. Finding somebody who has lived through it and sits with it and continues to work on it and continues to want to grow as a human, those are the therapists that I've liked the best.
Yeah.
Their growth, they're growing through you as a client,
Hmm.
as well as you growing with them. But that's the thing. This isn't like a hobby for me. I could talk trauma 24/7 and not get bored. There's a depth to it that you will never reach. There's always more to uncover. Those are the people you want to work with.
Amen. I can see it. You're alive just talking about it, because you've become
Yeah.
alive from working on it. It sounds like you've found yourself. Could you say it that way?
This lights me up. Listen, I would really wish I could be like a guitarist and just do a mean solo and get on stage and perform that way every night. But
Yeah.
this is where I feel most comfortable and feel at home. Part of the times I really do wish it was something more like going on tour with a band.
Well, it kind of is. I mean, you're speaking to different audiences every time you do this, and people listen to you. It's amazing. And I actually found you because a client told me about you, and
Cool.
she's like, you gotta listen to this guy. I'm like, all right, I'll listen to him, and I did. I'm like, whoa, this is great. This guy's doing the work. So it's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah. You got a mean guitar lick there. You get it, man. I was going to ask you too about this. Are you familiar with EMDR? EMDR?
I am. I haven't done it yet, but
Yeah.
I'm getting close.
Okay. Yeah,
I want to give it a shot.
I'm trained in it, and I appreciate it. I think it's on the right track because essentially, I like putting it this way: you get clogged up right here in the amygdala, if you will, the
Yeah,
emotional brain. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And one of mine is fawn. I just fawn. I'll lay down, whatever.
that's me. I'm
Yeah.
freezing fawn.
Yeah. And so, like, it's been really important for me. It's just one intervention of many. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, sit in a chair and cry. And EMDR is one way you can sit in a chair and cry. Bilateral stimulation, you activate the prefrontal cortex, and your brain starts making sense. Instead of getting so emotionally activated, your brain starts making logical sense of it. Like, oh my gosh, you start freeing yourself up. So anyway, that's interesting. I'm glad that you're open to it. But
There's actually a tab in Chrome with the doctor a couple of blocks from here. It's been up for like 3 weeks. I just haven't had the space to fill it in, but
yeah,
it's been on my list for a while. And the
yeah,
thing is, there's no one way to do this work,
no,
so it's kind of pulling pieces from different areas and trying different things. I'm working with somebody now doing body work and
yeah,
breathing work.
hmm,
I haven't been in my body for years. EMDR, the sitting with,
yeah,
the feelings, talk therapy, meditation, yoga,
yeah.
massages. It's like a bouillabaisse of just different treatments that
Yeah.
you can kind of keep adding in here or there.
Yeah, and there's tools, and there's no one tool, but I just think in you it's interesting because you're literally triggering the client. Like you're like, oh, I don't want to trigger anybody. Like, no, you actually trigger the client, but you do it in a way that it's not too much too fast, and you help them again get stronger and get more of a sense of what's really going on and to become more adaptive. It's fascinating. So it's what you're saying. You're pretty much doing EMDR in so many words.
Right, right. But
Yeah.
I definitely want to give it a shot. So,
Yeah.
you know what? I'll probably give you a call after this and talk more about it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be curious, just this idea of we defined what trauma is. We defined this idea of I love your 3-layer kind of idea, the self-hatred, the shame, and it's pretty much awareness and getting through that. And then you said you wouldn't mind kind of talking about where you were, what your life was like, and then how you changed and where you are now. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, okay. I was, kind of a shame-based family. There were feelings I was allowed to have. There were feelings I wasn't allowed to have. So I gravitated towards the feelings I was allowed to have to get those crumbs of affection. And, you know, full-blown alcoholic, started drinking and drugging at 10, was off to the
10.
races. Yeah, I started taking Valium to sleep, and then was sneaking beers and scotch from my father. And
Really?
it was just a way to kind of numb the brain. And then by 17, I was just full blown, just nonstop. And then I kind of hit bottom one day and I got clean for a very long time. And I adapted that full self role and just kind of kept portraying it to keep away from the feelings. But I didn't realize what I was doing. And, at some point I had lost pretty much everything in a very short period of time. And I was left with everything that was validation for me, that I could go, hey, look at this, look at that, look at this, don't look at me, but just look at what I got and achieve here. And that was all gone. And I sat with the feelings, and what ended up happening, I couldn't, basically for 2 years, I couldn't function. I never thought it was going to get any better. I just kept sitting in it. I realized that nothing outside of myself was going to take it away. And I found myself in a situation where I was getting pushed verbally and emotionally into a corner, and there was a click,
Mhm.
and I just started to remember things that I had no memory of previously.
Yeah.
And basically, it was just a trauma recall. I went back to this time of form of abuse that I didn't know was there, and I worked through it for 4 hours, just grieving it, screaming about it, crying about it, kicking about it.
Wow.
And there was this rawness after it. All the tension, all the anxiety, all the fear, all the panic was gone. I was just like flatline peace.
Wow.
And that was the light bulb for me, was the way out of trauma is through it.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening after that, I was a mess. Like I just, yeah, I couldn't function on different levels at that point. And I ended up got heavily into journaling, started to figure out that I want to go on knowing what I know. Could I live with myself? How do I want to? I didn't know, I had never been at this point, like this deep within myself. And then found a therapist. I went through three, fired them all because I was like, I started to tell the story of the trauma recall. I was like a third of the way in, and they were like, they couldn't. I could just see it. They were uncomfortable. So I went to a fourth person,
Yeah.
and she never blinked. I told the whole
Ha, ha,
story,
ha. There you go.
and that was it. We just, I'm forever eternally grateful to her. She was amazing. She sat with it week after week, going in, revisiting it, reprocessing it. She never wavered once.
Wow.
And then what ended up happening was, I don't know how many times I went back to that place, and she goes, "That's it, time out. Sorry, you're not going there anymore in this office." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "I'm just getting comfortable here. Like, I'm good. This is not an open wound anymore. The scar is healing." She goes, "Yeah, that's why you're not going there anymore. You could do it all you want at home on your own time, but you are safe there. You are not learning anything new." I'm like,
Mm.
"But I'm confident and competent in this. Like, this is all I've ever wanted, was to feel that somewhere." And she goes, "Now you need to feel that in other places." And then
Wow.
I just kept exploring different places, and it was the hardest time in my life, and it wasn't easy, and it was, I was a walking zombie of misery, but I kept working, I kept fighting through. There was something in me that just there was just self-love and self-care, was putting myself through the pain, because when I would go through, a week and a half of feeling like crap, I would get 4 days of feeling good.
Mm.
Those 4 days over time became 8 and 10 and 12. So I
Wow.
just kept doing this work. And then it was around the holidays one year, and I was alone on Christmas, and I was miserable, and I couldn't get off the couch, and I was like, "That's it. I am sick of this." And I went and turned on the microphone, and it all
Wow.
started right from there. Yeah.
When was the time that you said that you had that light bulb that went off before you even saw one therapist? How long ago was that?
It was probably about a little over 4 years ago now.
Wow. And you had nowhere else to turn, you said? You felt like kind of pushed into it. You just did it?
It was, well, I was with somebody, and, you know, I couldn't give her what she needed based on my history.
Mm.
So it came to a head, and I couldn't defend myself anymore. I couldn't bullshit. I couldn't
Ah,
lie. I couldn't like do the magic trip. Like, it's not really what's going on over here. It's this. And you know what? It may be you. Maybe it's you. Right. So it was more like, "No, you're right. I am fucked up. This happened to me.
mhm.
And this is why I have been fearful, and intimacy has been tough, and relationships, and the codependency, and my avoidance." And it just all came out. Like, every answer to every problem in intimate relationships was revealed.
Wow.
And I just kept going through it. And it was such a relief. It was humiliating, it was embarrassing, it was shameful, but it was a
Of course.
relief, because now I could connect the 8 million dots from the time of this event to the time I discovered it, of why I had done so many crazy, stupid things and derailed my life and self sabotaged so much.
Mm.
And that, to me, was the absolute turning point for my entire life. Like, I wish that I had discovered that at 18,
Wow.
because I don't know where I'd be right now, but I'm glad that it came.
What a
And there
gift.
was no, yeah. And as painful as it was, there were still more painful events that I had to process going forward. But there's a part of me that knows no matter what comes, I'm going to be okay through it, because if I survive those 4 hours of just intense feeling and sobbing and reliving, I feel like there's nothing I can't get past. It may be difficult, that I may hate it and avoid it for a little while, but eventually I'm gonna get in there.
Wow, this too shall pass. It was like your pseudo self was just stripped from you, and that's
Yeah.
what it sounds like. And that woman was a woman, right? Woman was a gift.
Yes.
She a partner of yours. She just said, "Nope, I see you. I see the real you." Poke, 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 and you're like, ah, and you just let it all
Yeah.
out.
And you know what? It was, yeah, because, like, I mean, you're kind of sitting it, and I was dealing with it. Normally, I would have run before we had gotten to the point where it got that uncomfortable for me, because I couldn't handle the feelings, and I wasn't running. I was sitting in it, and there was a part of me that knew it was me
Yeah,
and not her. So I was trying to work through it,
yeah.
but it got to a point where I knew what she wanted, I couldn't give yet,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of kind of pretending it wasn't there and avoiding, it was just right in my face, and it just became so clear, and I'm like, well, here it all is. This is why you can't have what you want with me, because I don't even know how to get here yet.
I'm so glad, and I'm sure a lot of people have this cruel thankfulness that happened to you. I'm really
Yeah.
glad you went through that pain.
Yeah. Yeah, I
What a
mean,
gift.
it didn't feel like it at the time, but now you look back on it, and that was the absolute turning point.
And you found out you can handle it.
Yeah.
I can handle it. So interesting, because then that propelled you to get into therapy. And I'm curious how you had the constitution, if you will, to be able to fire a therapist, since you've been ruled by self-hatred and shame, all underneath that trauma. Like, how were you able to, like, nah, you suck, fired?
You know what?
People need to
I
hear
still
this.
don't I still don't know, man. It was like I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can't work with you. And then I had left, and I was driving in the car, and I was white knuckling on the steering wheel. I was sweating, and I was panicking. I'm like, you've never done anything like
Yeah,
that before, like in front of their
it's
face. But
huge.
there's this thing that happens, and even the people that I coach, I see it with, that pushes up through the fear of everything that you've ever known
Mhm.
yourself to be.
Yeah,
It starts to take over. And I guess I knew, after going through that experience, I knew where I needed to go.
yeah.
And I knew this woman wasn't going to take me there.
Hmm.
So next. And then the other one was like, she was like 26 and looked like a runway model. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if I could, because you're still a guy. It's still in the back of your head.
Sure,
Like, I
sure.
can't
Of course.
embarrass myself in that way in front of you, because I'm going to be even more self-conscious
Yeah,
than I already am.
absolutely.
You're done. And at
That's real.
26, how how much experience has she had? Maybe she
Yeah,
has, maybe she hasn't. I felt
yeah.
like I needed somebody who had a couple more years like I did under their belt.
Well, not
And
only
then the
that,
third one,
yeah, she didn't blink. I love what you said. She did not blink.
no, at the end, because then I went, so now what?
Yeah.
And she goes, I said, do I go into a group? Do you assign me to somebody? And she goes, no, I'm going to take you on. I can't have you do that again with somebody else. And I
Wow.
was like, okay. And then I didn't miss a week for, I think, 3 years.
That's amazing. That is so cool. And I think it's super important, because I joke around kind of like churches sometimes. And look, I'm not trying to dog any religions, but it's a good business plan. And same with therapists. It's a good business plan to get people to depend on you. And it sounds like at some point she goes, nah, no, 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 no. You need to go do this out there now. Is that
Is
correct?
she That is correct.
Yeah.
It was, we finished processing this here. There's
Yeah.
nothing for you to learn with me. I can't teach you anything else with this. You have an abyss of hurt that you still need to go into, and you're chicken shit right now because you're so comfortable here.
Yeah.
And that's when we shifted. But you're right. Therapists want to keep getting paid.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's their, and so they kind of
Good.
keep
Yeah.
you dependent. Like, for me with the coaching, if you're with me for more than 2 or 3 years, I'm not doing my job. Sometimes people are done in 6 or 8 months.
Absolutely.
I don't, it's like the job of a parent. My job is to get my kids ready to go out there in the world, not stay dependent on me. It's the same thing with
Thank you.
therapists and coaching.
Thank you.
I don't slow up just to make it go longer. I want you as feeling as good as you can, as fast as possible, so
That's
that
how
you
I
could
think.
take that. that's how you could take all that good and spread it to somebody else, and maybe we start to make some kind of change.
But you might re-traumatize them, Joe Ryan.
You have to
I
traumatize to
know.
heal from the trauma. It's like,
I know.
I don't want to. You be an accurate mirror to them, and you hold that space so that they can grieve, and you build that trust where they know that they can say anything to you because you've been through it, and
I
you're
got
not going
you.
to take them out of it. And it's as painful as it is to see people hurt.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, like you said before, there's also a pleasure in it,
Oh yeah.
because I know that's the healing. And you're going to be lighter in an hour or a day from now when your body starts to catch up with the emotions. You're going to be more whole and complete. You're going to be walking lighter and taller. And it's amazing to watch. It really is.
I had one client, she just started like just and my boyfriend just came up and I'm like, okay, can you keep going? And she goes, yeah. And I'm like, okay, go with that. And we did the bilateral stimulation again. I didn't like, oh no, are you okay, sweetheart? No. And I was like, yeah, this is painful. Okay, let's keep going. And she's like, yeah.
Like the codependent and the people pleaser in me wants to take them out of their feelings. But you got you put that on hold. The thing is, they will take themselves out of their feelings
Yep.
when they're ready. Some people will go the whole session on one thread and just keep going. Other people, depending on what it is, they'll touch it, they'll start to feel it, they'll start to express it, and they'll sit in the grief and they'll sob and they'll cry. But then all of a sudden, it's a change of topic.
Yeah.
So they know internally that they've hit their limit, and I'm witnessing knowing that they hit their limit. I don't go, no, we need to stay with this.
Mm-hmm.
You have the ability to heal yourself, and you're going to experience what your subconscious feels like you can handle that day.
Yep.
And if she hits that point or he hits that point where they're done exploring it for today, we'll come back to it when you're more ready.
Exactly. And you get that more and more awareness and more stronger, and you get better. And the brain wants to heal itself. It's actually thrilled that you're doing this work in a weird way. It's thrilled. And yeah, it's so cool to hear someone that gets it. You get it, man.
Thanks. You know what? I didn't for a long time, but that one day it just all clicked, and it's weird to be able to see it so clearly now for what you struggled with, and that mental and emotional confusion that you just couldn't parse anything out. When you were talking about EMDR, the word that came into my head was parse. You're so overwhelmed in there that you can't figure out what the thoughts are or where they're coming from. But when it starts to get a little bit clearer, for me, it's addicting in a healthy way, because my body wants more freedom.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to see it clearer. And that's where, when I write, that's my clarity. So I write for clarity now.
Remember that part on Rocky 3 where Mr. T goes, pain. I use that in my head sometimes, like, oh, here it comes, pain. And I just embrace it. I use his little voice, and it's liberating to just not be how about this? To feel I was going to say to not have a fear. Like, well, no, I don't think you can ever get rid of fear, but to embrace the fear, feel the fear and do it anyway. Because fear says I can't handle it. But when I face it and deal with it, I find I can.
And that's the building blocks of the foundation of the self-trust. So you walk through that fear, your body, your mind, your brain knows it. You may have to do that same thing 27 times, 4 times, 3 times, whatever the number is. But every time you do it, you are building that strength, that foundation, competency within yourself. And it's just these building blocks where for me, it feels like the more I do it and the more I start to own that I'm okay doing this, even if I'm nervous still. After the 20th time, that confidence and that competency starts to fill the place where self-doubt and self-hate was residing. So the more you can build one, the less room there is for the other.
My friend Perzan says, go towards the heartbeat.
That's it.
Most of my life, I've been running away. Whenever my heartbeat's like, don't go towards that. No, now I'm like,
oh my God, what is that? Is that a feeling? Is that emotion? We got to get out of here. Where's the phone? Where's the booze? Where's the gambling? Let's go. And then it gets to the point where it's What is that, a feeling? All right, that's going to lead me somewhere. That's interesting. We're going to discover something. It's a
Yeah.
slow shift to go from one to the other.
And I joke with my clients, I was like, doesn't mean be reckless and go down a dark alley just because Colt said face your fear. That's not what I mean. I mean, like
Right.
it's got to be aligned with your values and where you're going and your healing, of course. And like this doing this podcast interview with you, it's aligned with my values. I'm at my edge, and
Mhm.
I'm okay. I'm getting stronger. I'm getting better at this. I'm having fun.
And
And
that's it. And it's walking, like you said before, you're walking through fear, and you're showing up as you, and you're putting yourself out there, and you're opening yourself up to criticism and vulnerability and all that. And when you live with abuse and trauma and all that, you don't want any of that. I just
yeah,
want under the radar. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be heard. I don't want to be noticed. But then I have that extreme need for connection
yeah,
at
yeah.
the same time, but the fear had always kept me more isolated,
Oh
where
yeah.
now the connection is stronger. I'm still uncomfortable with it, but I manage that uncomfortability.
And you better be uncomfortable if you're growing.
That's right.
if
That's
you're
right.
li-
If
if you're living, yeah, of course, that's living.
it's
Um,
almost like when you're comfortable for too long, you're like, wait a second, no, there's not a lot of learning and growth going on here.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then naturally something just comes up.
yeah, absolutely. I was gonna ask you because a friend asked me recently. Cole, I'm curious. Is everything at the end of the day just all go down to trauma? And I thought for a second, I was like, I think so. I'm curious what you think. I don't know. I don't know if that. I'm not sure.
For me, it's at least 90% of it, if not
Yeah,
more. But
yeah,
that's been my experience. So you're born pure and you're whole, and nobody raises kids perfectly. But there's certain things that we found out weren't allowed,
yeah,
and if you did that, somebody's punishment would be greater than others.
yeah.
So for me, it all stems from the abuse and the trauma. Like
Mhm.
that has just dictated my entire life. So, I could easily say 100%, but I feel like I need to take at least 10% responsibility. So I'm going to go with 90.
Okay, that sounds good. I think I like that. I'm just curious, just kind of wrapping up here, getting close on time. This is an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. What is as you because you've done the work, you've created more space to live. What are some of the things you've gotten into? It sounds like more music, maybe. I don't know. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I go down Greenwich Village. There's a couple of places I listen to music. I go by myself. I sit in the corner and I spend an hour or two, and that is like, to me, it's like the equivalent to going to Cancun for a couple of days. The music hits my soul in a way nothing else does. I kind of geek out in the corner. Everybody knows me there. They just leave me alone because I get in the zone, and it's like this recharge of energy, and it really lifts me up. That's a
Mhm.
big part of my hobby.
Yeah,
Just any kind of music on a peaceful level, like peaceful meaning I don't do the crowds well.
yeah,
I bike a lot now, so I'm biking
nice.
all around Manhattan a couple of days a week. I usually every morning I walk around the reservoir in Central Park. Just quieter things,
Yeah,
learning to be more still with myself, like the walks. Like I said earlier, I would have never taken a walk because I couldn't handle the obsessive thoughts. Now I'm looking at trees, I'm looking at the buildings, and so just kind of starting out, trying different things to see what I like, because I don't know who I am without all of the trauma
yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
So the trauma made me like things to stay away from it. Now that it's not there, it's like, well, what do I really like? So I keep trying different things. I just joined the softball league.
Wow.
So getting out there in the world again.
That is beautiful, and it is like that, isn't it? You have to kind of take yourself out on dates, maybe if you could put it that way, or take yourself like, let's see if I like this. I've been kind of exploring creating playlists because I remember when I was 8 or 9, I would record like radio songs and then make these playlists on tapes. And so I've been doing that on
Yeah, the
Spotify.
mixtape.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been doing that
Yeah.
on Spotify now, kind of like reconnecting with like, oh yeah, I used to do this, but just trying different things out and really bringing nectar to my life, bringing the sweetness to my life.
And that's it. There's, you know, not knowing who you are, you don't know what you like. Like what kind of food? What's my sleeping habits? What kind of clothes do I like?
Yeah.
So I've been in this in-between period of trying to shed the image that I've worked up so long to perfect, stripping that down, and then you get to the bottom and you're like, okay, I don't know what clothes to buy. I
By the way,
don't know
that
what
blue looks
food
good
I
on you,
like.
man. That blue looks great
Thanks.
on you. Brings out the eyes. It's a
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, yeah. I can see you can take a compliment. See, that's good.
That's that, I gotta ask you, that's been hard for me. Like with the
Yeah,
podcast, you just said that you get these messages. Like the messages I get kind of blow my mind because I
yeah,
get that negative side of me. It's just like, yeah, you know what? Those words might have been okay, but you don't really know how worthless and shitty I am. So I
right.
really can't believe what you're saying. So please don't tell me anything good because it makes me uncomfortable to challenges myself. Like that's how I used to be.
That's hilarious.
And
So true.
and over time, I've kind of I've gotten used to it. And a friend of mine, she was telling me, she goes, you're not selling yourself. Like I don't know how she put it. She goes, you're personalizing this. This isn't all of you. This is just something that you do.
Yeah,
But at the beginning, for me, it was like I do lay myself out there pretty openly. So I felt like I was giving everything of me away.
yeah,
Where now I realize that what I'm doing is just a part of who I am. So
yeah,
when that clicked for me, the compliments became a lot easier. I
yeah,
still squirm a little,
yeah, yeah.
but
Of course.
but not as much as I used to.
Hey, you're helping people, and it's amazing, and so am I apparently, and that's hard to realize too
Yeah,
and accept. And we're getting out of our own way, and I appreciate you, and it's really cool getting to know you and talking to you. And this
yeah.
was an easy conversation, even though it was hard for me to actually do it.
Yeah, no, man, it was great. You do great.
Yeah,
I love the questions. It flowed like a really nice conversation, and
yeah,
it gets difficult. I think for me, it's good. It's ebbs and flows. Like there's a part where I'm in a groove, and I'm like, yeah, I got this, and then it's like,
yeah,
yeah, I'm old. I'm that old guy this week that I used to be. Like it's just I'm not feeling it, and
yeah,
that's when it's hard to show up, right?
yeah,
When you're just
yeah.
not feeling it.
And how can people get in touch with you, contact you, support you?
Okay, website's joeryan.com. Mostly on Instagram at Joe Ryan, and the podcast is "It's Not You, It's Your Trauma."
Amen. All right, I appreciate you, Joe, and thank you.
Thank you very much. This was great. I appreciate it.
I'm going to stop the recording here.